Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to the 9th lecture of the course Management, Organizational Policies and Practices. Before we start with the contents of the lecture, I would like to have a recap on lecture 8. For lecture 8, we had a discussion on what is rational decision making, how do managers make decisions, what are the different constraints that the managers face while making decisions. So we started off with as a first step to rational decision making with the identification of the problem. Without identifying the research, the gaps in the which can be in the performance standards vis-a-vis the performance that has been actually achieved by the employees, or the gaps in a number of other areas, managers need to identify where those gaps are, which means that that would be leading them towards problem identification. Then we had a discussion on how on the different decision criteria that the managers need to assess or the managers need to have to make an effective and speedy decisions. So decision criteria are basically the judgments on which decision the managers have to make, right? And then we had a discussion on how the managers, they need to weight those decision criteria according to the degree of their importance and according to the context. And we had an example of the office computers, the purchase of computers for office use, that how for office use when you have to buy a computer, you may not need the CD-ROMs for all the computers on all employees, because you can have a shared CD-ROM on a when those computers are placed on a network, right? And so the importance or the decision criteria or the weightage of more reliability and more memory, and that might be more important in purchasing your office equipment or the computer for your office use. So this is how, according to your situation, according to your requirements, you weigh the different decision criteria that you arrive at, and then how you identify your different options based on those decision criteria. You identify a number of options, and then you, as a next step, you evaluate those options according to the weightage that you have assigned to all the different decision criteria. You evaluate each and every option, and we discussed that how this stage can be a little bit difficult in handling for the managers because of the information overload that this stage can entail with itself. Then we, on the basis of all the alternatives that we have searched for and that we have evaluated based on our decision criteria, we try to make a computer decision, right? And there can be different ways on how to compute the decision. There are some mathematical programs as well as there is programming as well. Then we have the programmed and non-programmed decisions as well. Then we looked at what are the different limitations to this rational decision making, the process of rational decision making that we discussed. We also discussed that there are certain limitations to that process, and those limitations can occur in the form of the different resources, the deficit on the part of the resources. The resources can be both be physical, they can be material, they can be human resources, they can be technological resources, so they can be all the kinds of resources, both tangible or intangible. They can put limitation on rational decision making by the managers, right? Then the managers, of course, their expert power or their expertise is limited on all the different areas, such as the technical specifications about the choice of computer. They might have the limited expertise on that, and it might not be possible to evaluate all the possible alternatives on all the possible decision criteria in an expert way. So the managers, they may need assistance from some other computer experts, for example, to make that or to arrive at that decision, and that process might cost the organization a lot, right? Then we had a number of other areas on which we had a conclusion that managers, they are limited to make rational decisions, and as a result they cannot maximize their decision making, but they need to satisfy their decision. So maximizing means that choosing the best possible option out of all the alternatives that are available to you or to the organization for decisions, and you are choosing the best alternative. So that is, you're maximizing your decision making. And then we had this concept of satisficing. We saw that because of the bounded rationality that the managers have, owing to the different factors, owing to the different limitations on the managers, they need to satisfy their decision, or they need to choose an alternative which is just good enough for the organization or for the managers. Then we also had a discussion on the common decision making mistakes that the managers oftenly make, and such as we studied that how the managers try to make this, or managers often make their decisions based on intuitions, such as, so this means that those decisions are not very well analyzed, they are not very well gauged against different alternatives, against different standards, but those decisions are just based on their own experience, or their own experience from the past, or their own intuitions, their own gut feelings. Right, and and we also discussed a number of other decision-making mistakes that are very common that the managers make, or which they should avoid, because those mistakes can be very costly for the organization. They can be very expensive for the organization, and those decisions, they can go wrong. Right. Then we study the concept of rules, different rules which are used to make the decisions by the organizations. So other than the different decision-making criteria, organizations also have different rules to make the decisions. We had a concept of this, and we studied that why organizations, or why the managers follow these rules, such as the decision rule, such as the dictionary rule, such as the threshold rule. Why the organizations or the managers, they follow these rules. We had a concept of this because they expedite the decision-making process, and they provide the standard ways for the managers, and very quick ways for the managers to arrive at certain decisions. Right. For example, in the threshold rule, we studied that you have a minimum requirement, for example, in a university, that only these candidates, they can apply, only they are eligible to apply. So we are already shortlisting, or we are already screening the candidates by setting this threshold requirements, right? For example, for admission into a PhD, you need to have an 18 years of education, right? So all the candidates who have the 18 years of education plus another eligibility criteria that normally universities set is that you should not have more than 2 second divisions, or some organizations said that you should have all the first divisions in your academic career, or your last degree should be a first division. Or there are different criteria that different organizations they set, but those criteria help those organizations achieve the desirable list of candidates, potential candidates, right, and screening out the undesirable candidates right away. So then we also studied the concept of the group decision making, how the decisions that are made individually, what are their advantages and disadvantages, and how group decisions they can provide a better choice to the organizations by the benefits that the organizations can get from the group decision making. We studied here the different other areas in the group decision making. We also studied the pitfalls of the group decision making, such as we had the understanding of how groupthink can occur when you're going to make decisions in groups, and what can be the different pitfalls of groupthink. And then we also studied the concept of devil's advocacy, where we saw that how the C-type conflict is arisen within the group, and that C-type conflict can encourage more challenge. It can challenge the assumptions of the solutions that are provided to a certain problem, and how then as a result it can encourage the debate or among the group members on vis-a-vis the content of the problem, or revolving around the task of the problem, which can be very healthy because it can promote much better decision making, and it can promote much better choices and solutions to the various problems, right? And then we also had studied the concept of brainstorming and electronic brainstorming, and the different advantages and the different disadvantages that it offers to the managers or to the organizations. So what are the different challenges to the organizations, and what are the different possibilities with the organizations or the managers they can execute to make effective decision making more effective in the organization. So we had a detailed discussion on these topics in our previous lecture. For this lecture, we are going to proceed to another area of management, which is managing communication. How the managers, they can manage communication, how they can make the communication mechanism in the organization more effective. So let's have a detailed look at the outline or the learning outcomes from today's lecture. First, you should be after learning or after going through this lecture, you should be able to identify what are the main functions of communication. Then you should also be able to describe the communication process and distinguish between formal and informal communication. You should be able to make a contrast between downward, upward, and lateral communication, and you should be able to provide examples of each. You should be able to make a contrast between oral, written, and non-verbal communication with the help of examples. Then you should be able to contrast formal communication networks and the concept of grapevine. Then for this lecture, you should be able to analyze the advantages and challenges of electronic communication. You should be able to show how channel richness underlies the choice of communication channel. You should be able to identify common barriers to effective communication, and you should be able to show how to overcome potential barriers in cross-cultural communication. Okay, so what are the different functions that communication performs, right? What do we expect from communication, or why do we communicate? Because of the different functions that the communication perform, right? That is why we communicate, right? So the first function that the communication performs is that it controls the members' behaviors. So how it controls the members' behavior? When a manager is communicating with the different members, it is basically, for example, in a number of areas, the manager communicates with the members. For example, in the job descriptions that the member is going to have, the job specifications, then how the job will be designed around the different work processes, right? What roles, what do's and don'ts does the manager expect from the employee, right? What are the different standards that the manager expects the employees to follow? What are the different procedures that the manager expects the employees to follow, right? What are the different consequences for ethical and unethical behavior, and all those that steps that are performed by the manager vis-a-vis the employee, telling the employee what are the expectations from the employee, then setting some standards for the employees, and then gauging the employees against those standards. It is all the control mechanism, it is all the control process, and this function is performed by communication. Of course, communication is the only way to perform this control function. So first function of communication is control. It controls members' behavior. Then we have the next function, which is performed by communication, is it fosters the motivation levels of the employees. You can insert, as the manager, you can insert the necessary motivation in the employees through communication, right? So that can be by storytelling, that communication, in order to foster the motivation in the employees. The managers, they can use a number of ways to foster that motivation in the employees. For example, by way of storytelling. Some managers tell very good stories about the other companies, that their success stories. They share some case studies, or they share with they can share with the employees that how their own company was succeeding in the past. Right? What are the great examples from the past that the employees can be motivated with, right? So the managers, they can use signals, they can use symbols, and they can use a number of other ways that with which they can motivate their employees, and so all this is performed through communication, right? By way of communication, you are motivating your employees that how they can do certain things, what are their powers to do certain things, how they need to explore and exploit their physical and mental capabilities and capacities, and how they need to identify with the goals of the organization, and how they need to supersede their own goals, and how they need to consider the interests of the organization, their own wider self-interest as well, right? So what the managers are doing, they are also, by way of communication, they're also clarifying the different objectives to the members, and that is by clarification of the objectives, when the goals are clear to the employees, that is also a way of motivating the employees. When the employees know what they are expected to do, that is itself a motivation for the employees, when their rules are not ambiguous. So that is only possible with the help of communication, when their rules are clear, and when the expectations are clear for them. That is only possible through communication. So that is the second function that the communication performs. Then the next function that the communication performs is it provides a release for emotional expression. Of course, when you are sharing something with others, when you are communicating with others, it provides you an outlet to share your feelings, whether they be positive or they be negative. So all the employees in the organization, it is their psychological need, and it is their human need, that they need to talk with someone, they need to communicate with someone. That can be their co-workers, that can be their colleagues from other departments, that can be their group members, that can be even their supervisors, that can be it can be anybody in the organization. So the communication here, of course, we are talking about organizational communication, so we are only talking about the different domains or the different areas or the different aspects wherein the employees communicate, or with whom the employees communicate. So that is only in the boundaries of the organization, right? So the employees, they can communicate with all these different groups of people at all the different levels, and that can provide them sometimes that this communication, it can provide it can be a very good source of catharsis to the employees, sometimes to co-workers, when they're sharing each other, or they were talking with each other, especially when they are also sharing the same job description. Then they are in a very good position to share their mutual feelings about the certain project, or about a certain job, right? About the expectations that the manager has from them. So this communication also provides this outlet for your emotional expressions, which is really important, and which is a mental and psychological and need of the employees, and it's good for their mental health. Then it provides information which is needed to make decisions, judge alternatives, and identify the problems, right? Of course, it's only possible through communication to enter into the necessary process through which the information that can be transmitted from one entity, or from one body, or from one person to the other person, right? Without communication, information sharing is not possible, right? So communication provides a very important function of sharing of this necessary information, which can be important on a different areas for the employee himself to perform his tasks. In the first place, information is important. He needs information on certain areas before he can complete his task, or before he can even sometimes start his task. He needs information on certain areas, right? Similarly, the information dissemination is only possible through communication. The information that the managers receive from the external bodies, they need to disseminate that to the members in the organization, and that is only possible through communication. The informations that there's certain informations that members or the group workers or the co-workers, they can share with each other, and that can also enhance the different the vision of the members. They can enhance the knowledge of the members, and that can help them to make better and quality decisions, right? It can increase the opportunities for the members to make better decisions, and it can increase the alternatives of the employees, and through which they can choose the best possible alternative for the better decision making. That is all possible through information sharing, which can be done through communication only. So these are the four major functions that communication performs in the organization. Then we see that what is the process of communication, how communication takes place, right? Of course, first there is a channel, which is the medium which is selected by the sender through which the message travels to the receiver. So there can be a number of mediums which can be selected by the sender to send a certain piece of information to the receiver. And there can be two types of channels. One are the formal channels and the other ones are the informal channels. Formal channels are basically the ones that are used to transmit, or that are used to diffuse the information, the formal information of the company, right? So here basically the formal hierarchy or the formal chain of command is basically followed. That information will follow from the manager to this level, right? And by this way it will be transmitted to this and this level. For example, a manager has to issue a notification on a certain area. It has to issue a policy statement, for example, right? So that policy statement will be in the shape of an office memo, right? So that is the formal channel of the communication of the information. And then so it is the formal channels. They are established by the organizations and transmit messages that are related to the professional activities of the members, right? So they follow chain of authority. Then we have the informal channels, which are used to transmit personal or social messages in the organization. These informal channels, they are spontaneous and emerge as a response to individual choices, right? So informal knowledge sharing, there can be a number of informal channels through which you are sharing your informal information, which is more related to the social aspects, to your social networking, and which are more related to your personal aspects, right? There can be a number of channels that you can use for that informal communication or informal sharing. So what are the different elements of the communication process? We see that first we have the sender, then we have encoding, the message itself, the channel, decoding, the receiver, noise, and feedback. So let's have a look at them in detail. We have a model here, and it would be easier for me to explain to you, and it would be easier for you to comprehend as well with the help of this model, the communication process. So it's a very simple process model. Here what is happening is that if you look at the left hand side of this model, at the two blocks appearing at the left hand side, we have the sender here, right? Of course, the message, the whole process starts with the sender, and before that it starts with the message itself, right? So you need to have a message, of course, to start the communication, right? So if you're entering into a written communication, then that writing is the message. If you're entering into oral communication, then your speech is the message. Whatever mode of communication you're following, you of course are going to have some message. So there needs to be a message, and the process starts with the sender, who has to send that message, right? So what the sender would do is that he would encode the message. So encoding of the message means that he would be putting that message into his own language. If he has to write that message, he will be devising appropriate language to write that message. If he has to orally deliver that message, he will be again encoding that message into how he has to deliver that message, what words he has to use, how he has to speak up, and like that, right? So that would be the encoding of message that will be done by the sender. So we have the message, then we have the sender who is going to send that message by encoding that message. Then the channel that he uses, that how he has to send that message. As I told you earlier, it can be a written channel, it can be an oral communication, and then in written channels we again have a number of channels that we'll be discussing in our upcoming slides, and there can be a number of oral possibilities as well, that how you are going to share your message, right? How you're going to send your message. So, and on the right hand side of this this model, we have the receiver. So the message is then through a channel by the sender, the message has been received by the receiver. So what will receiver do with the message? He will decode the message. When he will read the message, or when he will listen to the message, he will interpret that message, and the way he is interpreting that message, that is basically the decoding of the message, right? And then there are certain noises in this whole process that are involved, right? For example, there can be perceptual differences, that how if there is a difference of culture, or there can be a number of other differences that can serve as the voices towards the smooth decoding of this message from the sender to the receiver. Right, and then the feedback is the process, or it is the mechanism which shows us, which gives us, of course, the feedback, the information on how the message has been received by the receiver, right? So feedback is that process. Has it been decoded the way the message was coded? Has it been received or and interpreted by the receiver in the same sense it was sent by the sender side, right? So it is all, we can get to know all this through feedback. So we'll see that how there can be the different, what are the different channels of in the communication process, what can be those channels exactly, and how the noise, different noise elements, and how the degree of feedback varies according to the different channels that we can choose for the communication process. Communication, direction of communication, what direction this communication takes place, that happens in the organization. So it can take three different directions. It can be upward communication, which is going upwards. It can be the downward communication, which is down the line or with your juniors in the hierarchy, and it can be the lateral communications, which can be at the equal levels. So let's have a detailed discussion on all these three different directions of communication. Okay, first we have this downward communication. So as I told you, that downward communication is flowing down, right? So when it happens, downward communication, it generally happens when there is this chain of hierarchy in the organization. There is this command system. There are defined reporting relationships in the organization, and what is happening is that the manager is basically communicating to its members, or to its subordinates, or to its supervisees, or to its workers. When the manager is coordinating with them, when the manager is communicating with them, he is using this downward communication. So there can be a number of ways when this downward communication is happening. Any communication that takes place between the manager and his employees, or his supervisees, or his workers, that is all downward communication. When the manager is communicating the organizational rules and policies to its employees, that is downward communication, right? So when he's giving some notification to the employees, that is again downward communication. He is asking some reports from the employees by sending them the email, or by calling them by telephone, etc. That is all downward communication. When he is telling the employees their job description, that is also downward communication. So any communication that is taking place between the manager and his employees comes under, and that is downward communication, right? And there can be, of course, a number of ways the managers can enter into this downward communication with his employees. So it can be oral communication, which can be face-to-face. It can be written communication in the form of emails, or writing memos, or writing notifications, etc. Then for effective downward communication, what is important by the managers is that they should realize the importance of sharing with the employees appropriate information, taking their appropriate feedback on certain problem before making a decision. So group decision making, as I explained to you earlier in my previous lecture, that what are the different benefits of the group decision making, what are the different benefits of taking all the employees or most of the employees in the loop when you are faced with some problem, and when you are devising certain alternatives, or when you are making your choices or your decisions as to how to face or solve that problem, right? Or whatever aspect in the organization, or whatever issues in the organization, or whatever important decisions the organization has to make, the managers should ask the input of its employees before making or before arriving at a final decision. So one, it would give the employees a sense of cohesiveness. It would give them a sense of identification with the organization. It would give them a sense of ownership with the organization. They would feel that they are being cared by the organization, they are important for the organization, and they have a say in the organizational decision making. So it would increase their psychological identification with the organization, and they would more be likely to own the decision that has been made by the organization or by the managers. But what actually happens is that it has been reported in most of the studies that managers, they often communicate with the employees. The downward communication that happens between the manager and the employee is only one way. That is not two-way. So the managers are only communicating the decisions to the employees. They are not taking the input of the employees in making those decisions, right? So a report shows that around 2/3 of the employees believe that their opinion has never been asked from the managers before making any decision. And from the manager's perspective, managers often believe that when they will open up the situation or open up the problem in front of the employees, then it would be like opening a Pandora box in front of the employees and opening a box of worms in front of the employees, and it would be a situation that would be leading to no end. It would be a situation that would be leading to more confusion and chaos, and a more long time before the decision can be arrived at, right? So that is also the perspective of some of the managers, and also in some cultures, in some organizations, and also for some employees, when the manager places the problem in front of the employees and asks them that how they should arrive at certain decisions, some employees also perceive that it is the lack of the manager's ability to evaluate and to analyze the problem and to reach at a decision. That is why the manager is asking the input from the employees. So in some cases that is also the case, but generally what happens is that managers, they do not make this participative decision making, and they overlook the importance of participative decision making. Then we have this upward communication. Upward communication is, just as the name indicates, contrary to the downward communication. It is the communication with the boss or with the manager. So it could be, of course, the boss of the employees at the shop floor worker, and it could also be the boss of the boss. When the managers, they are communicating with the managers at the top level, they are communicating, they are entering into this upward communication, right? So the managers, they of course, they also often need to report to the top level managers. For example, the first line managers, they're reporting to the middle level managers, and that is upward communication, where the middle level managers ask for feedback from the front line managers or the first line managers for their for the reports on their departments or on their business units. That is the upward communication by the lower level managers with the top level managers, where they are communicating the organizations or their departments, their department's position or their department's outcomes or results with the top managers, and they want to have some feedback, or they want to have some certain consultancy on different areas, that how they need to improve on them, or how they need to address certain issues. That is the upward communication. And so upward communication, that can also be between the employee and the manager, the first line manager, as I told you. So of course it's difficult day by day. It is getting more difficult to enter into this upward communication, because the managers, they are increasingly busy and their time schedules, they're heavily booked. So how you need to communicate with your manager effectively? There are certain steps that if you follow, you can enter into more effective communication with your managers. Such as when you are communicating with your manager, you need to try to reduce the distractions. How? Such as try to meet your manager in some conference room, right? So instead of meeting in his office. So how that would of course reduce the distractions, because manager's office is a place where many people are coming and going at the same time. A manager has to receive many phone calls at the same time, right? and there are many people from the external to the organization, such as the different suppliers or the different customers or the different, for example, the parents of students, etc. They're coming to the organization or to the manager's office, who want to meet the manager. There can be the company's own employees who are coming to the manager. So that is not a very good place to communicate effectively with your manager. Then you prepare your headlines, right? You should be well prepared. You should have your points in your hands, or you should have them written down in your notebook when you are going to manager to have some discussion with the manager on certain problem or whatever, right? So you need to prepare the headlines, right? You don't need to prepare a long essay, right? So that the discussion can be crisp, and the manager's attention does not get distracted by feeling that you're talking unnecessary or irresponsible, right? So you should try to talk crisp and try to talk to the point with your manager. Discuss in headlines, right? Not in paragraphs. Then you also need to support your headlines with actionable items, that if you have certain problem and you have certain alternative solutions and you want to take this kind of action, you need to communicate to the manager that this is the problem, this is what I want to do, and this is how I want to do it, or these are the possible benefits of why I'm choosing this, or why this is better over this. So you should be very well prepared. You should have an agenda in your hand. That agenda should be well written with you, so that you do not forget some important points in that agenda which you really wanted to discuss, and which you have again forgot to discuss, and the meeting is over, and now it's again difficult to get into a meeting with your manager, right? And you have to wait again. So it should be very well planned, well written agenda, and it should be well supported. Your arguments should be well supported. So that is a key to effective communication with your managers, especially when the managers, they have increasing pressures from all the corners of the organization, inside and outside. Then the lateral communication is basically among the same group members at same level. It is between the can be between the counterparts of the organization, the people who are working at the same level, at the same position, such as the clerical workers, right? It can be between the managers. Then again, it is a lateral communication. So it is not up and down the hierarchy, or up and down the status, or up and down the position, but it is between the two people who are working in the same status in the same organization, right? So the communication between the different departmental managers, different functional managers, right? For example, the marketing manager, the HR manager, the discussions between them, that is the lateral communication. And again, the communication between the two workers, as I gave you the example of the clerical workers, that is again the lateral. Why lateral communication is needed? When we have the vertical communication, we have the upward communication, and we have the downward communication, then why we need this lateral communication? Because verbal communication, it can often impede quick decision making. As I told you in my earlier in the previous slide, that how it can be difficult to get time from the managers who are often very busy with their schedules. So all this kind of hurdles in vertical communication, that can sometimes impede your decision making process, right? It can as a result, you might feel like entering into lateral communication. So if, for example, a co-worker, he does not know how to get out of a particular problem, right? And what are the different alternatives that are possible, or what is the best choice he can make. He may be discussing the same with his co-worker in the same position, and he might be getting some ideas or some feedback from the co-worker, which is the lateral communication, and he arrives at a solution to the problem. So that is why lateral communication is sometimes needed. When you in the vertical communication, there are certain loopholes, such as that may not be as fast and it may not be as quick. So to overcome those, you enter into this lateral communication. But sometimes this lateral communication, it can be dysfunctional, and in certain organizations, certain managers can prohibit this lateral communication. They can sanction this lateral communication, because sometimes what you're doing is that when you're entering into lateral communication, you're relying too much on your co-worker's opinion or on your co-worker's advice, and sometimes in doing that, For example, you are not taking necessary approvals from your managers before doing a certain task or before doing a certain job, but you just you were told by your coworker that do it like this, or make this decision or make this choice, and you are doing it on the advice of your coworker by the lateral communication with your coworker. You're making that decision. You're not following the organizational policies or the organizational procedures the way they are stipulated or the way you're expected to do that. Then in that case it can be dysfunctional for the organization, and sometimes managers can sanction this kind of communication. Then we have this interpersonal communication. Of course, as I told you earlier, there can be a number of ways that this communication it can take place. It can be written, and it can be oral, and it can be non-verbal communication as well. So oral communication is, of course, when you are talking to someone, right? When you're communicating with someone face to face, when you're meeting with someone and making your communication with that person, right? So it has certain advantages. One of the strongest advantage of this mode of communication is its speed and the feedback that you receive quickly on this. Of course, when you have to communicate an important organizational decision, for example, to certain employees, and you've called a meeting, you meet with them face to face with you call a departmental meeting, and you meet all your employees face to face. You deliver a speech in which you communicate all the different organizational objectives and all the different decision making criteria and how you made a decision, etc. Right? So here what is happening is that, one, you have communicated to all the department what is going on in your organization, or what decision you have reached with very good speed. And this communication channel or oral communication, it is also expected to be very accurate, right? And it also, the immediate feedback is likely from the members or from the departmental employees, right? Because when they will listen to you, they are expected to respond quickly, how they feel about what you have decided or what you are saying. So you receive an immediate feedback, right? If they do not understand what you're saying, they will ask you to please repeat what you said, right? So chances of the message being decoded by the listeners, that would be highest when you are sending the message by way of oral communication. When you are using this oral communication channel, then it's highly likely that message would be decoded the way it was coded, right? And it has been interpreted correctly by the receiver, right? So, but there are certain disadvantages as well to this method of communication, such as distortion of the message when it is passed through a number of people. So, for example, if you have given a message just for your understanding, I have an example that if you give a message to the team leader as a manager on phone or in face-to-face meeting, that this is we should do this thing, we should follow this procedure to do this, or we should do it this way, or this is how it will be done, right? Or this is the organizational decision on this, right? Any message that a manager gives to the team leader, and the team leader gives this message to the organizational member, to the team member, and the way it has been sent by the manager, it may not be told exactly the same way by the team leader to the team member. So of course here it may be unintentional, but the somehow the tone of the message will change, or the content of the message will change slightly when it will be transferred from one person to the other person. And when that other person will transfer that message to still another member, that message again would be slightly changed. So you must be familiar with that telephone game in which when a number of people are sitting and you give a message to the first person in the group, and that person gives the message to the next, and he to the next, and when it reaches the last person in the group, then that message is entirely different from the message that was initially sent. So this is what happens. This is the drawback of this oral communication. But we have another communication channel, which is the written communication. So written communication channel, it has certain advantages, such as it is tangible. Of course, you have this information in the written form. You have your communication in the written form and in the shape of a tangible document, compared to the oral communication, which is not tangible, that is intangible. There is no trace possible to this oral communication, right? So written communication is basically tangible. It is well thought. It is more logical. It is clear and verifiable. When as a sender you are writing something, you are more careful, because you know that whatever you are writing will become a document and will become an official document, right? So you are very careful in devising your message. I told you an example about a CEO of a company. In one of my lectures, what he does is that when he is writing an email, or he's writing a message for his employees, or he's writing a memo for his employees, he writes us 10 to 20 times before he actually sends the memo, right? Because he is too much concerned about the language that he is using in that message, right? And the way it will be interpreted by the employees, because this the language, or these memos, or these written documents, they are also setting a tone of the organization. They are also setting a climate of the organization by way of telling the employees that what you are expecting from them, right? So you really need to be careful in devising these kind of messages for effective communication and for effectively communicating the purposes of the organization to the employees, right? So this is one of the advantages of this written communication, is that it is really it is more logical, right? It is more well thought, and it is more clear and verifiable. Of course, you can verify what at any time, whether it is 10 years back from the company records, that what was stated. But in oral communication, that is not possible. It's not possible to verify what you said, right? So it cannot be, of course, it cannot be distorted, as was the case with the oral communication, which can be easily distorted. This written communication cannot be distorted, and people are more careful when they are following the message which is received in the written communication. They take that message more seriously, and they are more careful in interpretation of that message. So you might be reading your email 2, 3, 4, 5 times, which you are receiving from your boss, right? You're taking that seriously, that it is coming from my boss, right? And then there are certain disadvantages to this written communication as well, such as it is more time consuming. Of course, it is not as fast as the oral communication, where you are holding a meeting and you are telling your decisions to a number of people face to face, right? Here, of course, you have to devise a memo, you have to write something, you have to think before writing that something, and that is why it is more time consuming. Interpretation by receiver not certain, and lacks quick feedback as in oral message. So what the different advantages of the oral communication are basically the pitfalls of written communication. Here we can see that it is not that quick, and it is the quick feedback is also not possible on written communication, and also it is not you are not sure how it will be interpreted, as was the case in the oral communication, where you are entering into face-to-face communication. You receive an immediate feedback, and you know that your message has been interpreted well by the receiver. But in this case, you are not sure how well your message has been decoded and interpreted by the receiver. Then we have another form of interpersonal communication, which is non-verbal communication. Here what is happening is that in any verbal or written messages, you are somehow following this non-verbal communication basically. So non-verbal communication is basically the different, for example, by way of the body gesture that you're using when you're communicating, whether that is oral or written, your glance, the frown, a smile. When you're when you are entering into the written communication, you can also have different ways of this non-verbal communication, such as the tone that you're using, such as the emoticons that you might be using. That is a form of a non-verbal communication. And when you are orally communicating, you are communicating with a smile or with a frown or with a glance or with the general body movements or with your general facial expressions, etc. Your message that can be changed. The tone of your message can be changed, and it can have different effects on your listener. Different listener can make different interpretations based on your the non-verbal messages, or based on your non-verbal communications. So there are different advantages of this non-verbal communication. One, it supports other communications and provides observable expressions of emotions and feelings. But there are certain disadvantages of this communication as well, such as misinterpretation of body language or gestures that can influence receiver's interpretation of message. Sometimes the receiver can misinterpret your gestures, or he can misinterpret your body language, and that can lead to a false or wrong interpretation or wrong communication of your true message. Then sometimes message in verbal and non-verbal communication, they can be conflicting, such as we can meet now, but at the same time you're looking at your clock again and again, right? So when you're asking, for example, the time from your manager, and he's saying that, oh yes, we can have a meeting now, but you are also looking at your clock again and again, then it will be confusing for you that what your manager actually wants. Does he really mean by saying that we can have a meeting now? Right? And similarly, there can be other non-verbal messages that can be misleading, or that can be conflicting with the verbal messages, such as standing close to someone, that can give different meanings. Right? So if you're standing close to your employee or your co-worker, it might give you a feeling of closeness. And if you are just away from that member and communicating from a distance, then that can give a different meaning. We'll discuss about this in detail in our upcoming sections, that how it happens and why it happens. Then we have this non-verbal communication. We discussed that by way of body movements, by way of other physical distance or the facial expressions, etc. How you can enter into this non-verbal communications, right? So we have here an example of different intonations that can change your the meaning, that can change your how you can with the change of your tone, the meaning of your sentence can entirely change, such as the placement of emphasis on certain letters, on certain words. They can change the meaning of what you're saying. So let me choose here two or three different lines randomly, and then you just as examples, and then you can have a look at the rest. One, we see that, why don't I take you to dinner tonight? Right? If you're saying it like this, why don't I take you to dinner tonight? So what would it be mean, or how it would be communicated? I was going to take someone else. That's why I'm not taking you to dinner tonight, right? And then if we say that, if we put more emphasis in the same line on why don't I take you to dinner tonight? Then it would mean that, do you have a problem with me, right? Then if why don't I take you to dinner tonight, instead of going on your own, you're emphasizing here on take, that instead of going on your own, why don't I take you to dinner tonight, right? And then why don't I take you to dinner tonight? If you're emphasizing more on tonight, it would mean that not tomorrow night, right? Or not at any other night. Why not tonight, right? So this is how the same sentence, your emphasis on different words in the same sentence, or your change of tone in the same sentence, how it changes the meaning of what you're saying. Then we have the formal small group network. Here we will see that in organizations how the different networks they can be formed, and how the communication effectiveness varies vis-a-vis all those different networks. What are their different strengths and weaknesses, or what are their different drawbacks and advantages, etc. Rightly. So here we have this mainly the organizations. If we here we just for simplicity we are assuming that in each group there are 5 members, or there are 5 people. So we have 3 kinds of formal groups that we are discussing here. One is the chain. In chain, what is happening is that, as you can see from the figure on the left hand side, that there is reporting relationships. There is formal hierarchy. Right, so there is a manager at the top, and there are 2 more levels of the management. So there are 3 hierarchical levels, and this is how it has been. This is so we have the top manager here, we have the line managers in the middle, and we have the employees at the bottom. Right, so this is the chain where there are reporting relationships and there is hierarchy. The other level which we have is the wheel. So in wheel, what is happening is that again we have taken 5 members in each group, and we are considering these small groups. Then in wheel, what is happening is that we have a team leader, right, and we have these 4 team members. And in all channels, what is happening is that we have we don't have a manager, we don't have a team leader, there is no hierarchy, there is no reporting relationships. All members are at the same level. As you can see from here, they are all communicating with each other, and there is no team leader or there is no manager, etc. So what's happening is that in all these different types of networks, we'll see that how the effectiveness criteria differs, right? With respect to a number of criteria, we'll be seeing all these different types of groups that can be prevalent in the organizations, such as the speed, accuracy, emergence of a leader, and member satisfaction. So with respect to speed, you can well imagine that in a chain type of network, such as this, the chain of command, your speed is expected to be moderate. Why? Because as I told you earlier, that anything that is going from down to bottom, and then some approvals are coming, and then because there are formal reporting relationships, and you have to follow certain policies and procedures before arriving at decision, you need to get certain approvals, etc. So speed is going to be moderate. In wheel, where we have this team leader who is and there are certain team members, the speed is of course going to be very high here, because there is only you only have the team leader, and you have to he is going to facilitate in decision making in different areas. And then in all channel, again it is going to be very high, that the speed is going to be very high, because here we have the concept of self-autonomous teams. This is basically the network which is depicting the self-autonomous teams. Wheel is depicting the team structure, but it is there is a team leader as well. Here in all channel there is no team leader, as we see that in the criteria, emergence of leader. In chain there is moderate. In wheel there is high emergence of leader. We have a team leader, right? We have a strong team leader. And in all channel there is no team leader. There are all members of the team who are self-managed, right? And they may set their own goals, they evaluate on themselves on their own goals, they are accountable for their own goals, and they have their own targets, right? And they have their own mechanisms on how they have to achieve those goals, what are the different strategies on which they have to achieve those goals. They are not guided by some leader or some manager. Accuracy of decisions, of course, as you can expect, it is going to be high in chain, because everything is really formalized and everything is written down in policies and procedures, and we are following those. In wheel, again, it's going to be high, and in all channel it is going to be moderate, because of no emergence of a leader, or there is no manager, etc. So then we see that what is grapevine. Grapevine is when the different members of the group or the different employees, they start informally talking about the various organizational decisions or various organizational policies or different issues that might be going on in the organization. When they start talking with each other, and then there are certain rumors about certain happenings in the organization at a higher level or with the managers that are not being communicated by the managers to the employees, and through certain rumors they get to know what is happening first before that has actually been communicated by the organization. So it is informal, it is not controlled by the management. It is perceived by most employees as being more believable and reliable than other informal communications. So employees believe that the information that they are getting through this kind of rumors about the organization, they are more trustworthy and they are more believable. Then they are largely used to serve the self-interests of those who use them. Right? 75% of the employees, they listen about news first through rumors and grapevines. So studies report that 75% of the news that the employees have, they hear first through this grapevine, then coming directly from the organizational channels or the formal channels. Another interesting report that I was studying was that an executive, he resigned in an organization. 81% of the other people knew that they have been the executive has resigned. Out of the people who knew that the executive has resigned from the organization, 81% of the people, they kept the information to themselves, and 11% of them shared with others. So as a result of sharing with others, what happens is that you are again this is what grapevine is, that when you are sharing the informally the information with others and how it reaches those to whom the organization has not formally communicated the information, right? So it can be positive for our organization, and managers know what is important for the employees. When you enter into these rumors or the grapevine in the organization is when there is certain area or certain problem in the organization, or there is certain decision that the organization has to take which is really relevant and important to you, right? You desire to get that information that is important for you, and you are really vigorous to get that information. You're really anxious about that that information, but you're not getting that information only, and then these rumors basically spread and you get that information from this kind of sources, which is the grapevine. That is when grapevine occurs, when the information is really important for you and it is about important situations, it is about important events, and there is ambiguity in the situation is not clear, conditions are not clear, they are ambiguous, nothing has been communicated by your manager to you, and you are really anxious. In that kinds of conditions, they basically spread this grapevine. And of course it can be sometimes good for the managers, because the more important the information is for the employees, the more there will be rumors and grapevine about that information, and it will be giving a signal or the message to the managers that how important it is for the employees to know. So this is the grapevine and all the points in the grapevine that we have just discussed. Then we see that how the managers, they can reduce the negative consequences of rumors. Of course, they need to announce the timetables for making important decisions. What would that do? That would reduce the anxiety amongst the employees, and they will have a feeling that they will be communicated the important decision or the message or what's happening in the organization. Then explain the decisions and behaviors that may appear inconsistent or secretive. The managers, they need to give those explanations, and that can reduce the anxiety of the employees. Then it can emphasize the downside as well as the upside of current decisions and future plans. Openly discuss worst case possibilities. It is almost never as anxiety provoking as the unspoken fantasy. So if you make discussions of what is unexpected or what is undesirable with the employees, that is better than if you keep that unspoken. Then we see that we have another source, which is the channel aided, the computer aided communication. Here we have the emails. We have different advantages and different disadvantages of the email system. So some of the advantages are it is written, it is stored, of course, right? So we can keep a record of this anytime, and it is very low cost. right? So it costs only less than a few cents to you to send an email, right? But there are certain disadvantages of email as well, such as the 50% of the information being misinterpreted has been reported in the emails, so decoding is not as effective as in the case of oral communication. Again, it has same disadvantages that we did for the written communication. Then there are certain cautions, such as the communicating negative messages. You need to be very careful when you are communicating those negative messages with vis-a-vis the emails to your employees, right? Because they can sometimes invite aggression and violence from the employees. But when you are entering into face-to-face communication or oral communication, then communicating negative messages, that might be you can draft your tone and you can create a situation such that you can make your decision more justifiable. But for the written communication, in case of emails, you need to be very careful, such as the reporting to the employees about the layoffs. Then the information overload, that is also sometimes, most often the case. It has been reported that almost 50% of the people, they spend 2 to 4 hours a day in only checking their emails and only responding to those emails. And it has also been reported that almost 20% of the emails that managers receive are really to the purpose, and the remaining are junk. Right, so the managers, of course, they have to handle all that information. They have to respond to all that information that is coming to them, and that can sometimes create the information overload for the managers and difficulty handling them. Then a lack of emotional content. Of course, the emails, they cannot, they are not that much emotionally rich as the other sources, such as the oral communication. They can be cold and they can be impersonal and they can be too formal. But there are certain ways, such as now emoticons have been introduced, which to show your emotions, but of course their use is restricted in the formal for formal sending and receiving of emails, and that is discouraged. Then we have the privacy concerns from the corporate and the personal levels, such as some organizations, they might have policy that you cannot use the company email account for your private use, and or from your company emails you cannot forward those emails to your personal accounts, because personal accounts, they may not be as safe as your company accounts are. And then when you're sending your information to the personal accounts through your company accounts, then that company information might not be that safe. So then we have an instant messaging, which is another way of this communication, that is via desktops and laptops, the instant messaging that you do. Of course, it is again real time email transmitted straight to the receiver's desktop. It is the advantages as we have of the email, right, and very quick and fast way of transmitting your communication or your message. But it has its disadvantage again, that it can be distracting and it can be intrusive. So instant message, what you're working on your desktop and suddenly a message pops up on your desktop and it distracts your attention. Then you have the text messaging, which is done via cell phone. That is also the use of these text messages has also increased considerably over the years. Now 80% of the managers or the employees who are in the meetings, they are reported to check their cell phones for these text messages. So of course it is again distracting amongst an important meeting that you are sitting in. You are talking very important points, agenda points, and your phone is ringing again and again and giving you notifications of these text messages, and most of you can be junk as well. So then we have the social networking groups, such as the Facebook, MySpace, which are for the social networking, and we also have these professional groups such as the LinkedIn, etc. Then another way of this computer-aided communication is this intranet, right, which is the private organization-wide information network, where you are linked to all the other people through this network. Your computers are linked with the others' computers through this network. And you have the extranet, where an information network which is connecting the employees with the external suppliers or with the customers or with your strategic partners. Then another form of computer-aided communication is these web blogs. So many organizations have created these blogs where the employees or the customers they can leave their messages, or they can leave their comments on the product or the service of the company or the organization. So of course this kind of some organizations they review and edit the content of these blogs, right? And in some organizations they have the policies that certain types of materials they cannot be posted on the blogs, but certain organizations they keep those blogs open and they do not edit any information. They don't have any policies which are restricting the customers to put their complaints or to put their comments about the organization's products in those blogs, and they take them as a feedback from the customers to improve their product or service. Then we have this video conferencing. Video conferencing, of course, it's another way where all the members in a group, for example, or which are sitting at the very distant positions, they don't need to come up and gather on one group to for have a meeting or have a discussion over something, right? So here what is possible is that irrespective of the distance, you can virtually conference with each other. That can both be audio and video, right? And you can have a discussion. Of course, this mode of discussion or communication, it can sometimes be very effective because it can really save you a lot of expense, a lot of money, which otherwise different people sitting at different places they had to spend while for coming to one place. And of course it can save a considerable amount of time as well. Then of course the knowledge management, it is really important because the knowledge in the organization, I've told you in one of my presentations, and here again I'm not going to really discuss this in detail. I will be very shortly discussing this knowledge management here, and we'll have a more detailed discussion on this in one of our next lectures. So here we see that it is basically the process of organizing and distributing an organization's collective wisdom, so the right information gets to the right people at the right time, right? So there are two things that are important with the knowledge management. One, you need to have very effective knowledge information systems, right, which can store the information where it is possible to correctly, accurately store the information, and where it is possible to retrieve that information whenever you need certain information. So you need to have very effective knowledge information systems which need to be constantly and continuously updated so that you can get timely information whenever that is needed, right? And secondly, you need to have that kind of culture in the organization which promotes this knowledge sharing and which promotes this knowledge management, right? Then we have the channel richness. How the different channels that we discussed about for communication, what is their level of richness, and which channel, when it is appropriate for managers to use which channel, right? So there are different characteristics of rich channels, such as they handle multiple cues simultaneously, right? Such as oral communication. Your even non-verbal cues, they're also being sent to the employee, and other than the content or other than the message, then it is facilitate rapid feedback and are very personal in context. So if we see from this figure, we'll see that the highly rich channels are the face-to-face conversations where you are using both the verbal and the non-verbal channels of communication. And then the video conferencing is another way where again you are face-to-face, although you are sitting at remote places, but you are seeing each other and listening each other live. And so this is again a very rich channel of communication. Then but the lowest channel richness is offered by these memos, letters, and the bulletins and reports by the managers. They are least rich channels of communication. So the more rich channel of communication you're using, the more, of course, powerful channel and more effective channel that is going to be in terms of this, that it is providing you, it is accurate and is providing you good feedback at the same time as well. And these kind of channels such as memos and reports and letters, I already told you what are their disadvantages and advantages. So this is the written form of communication, and this is on the right side, the oral form of communication. Then there are different barriers to effective communication, such as the filtering. Filtering is a very important barrier to effective communication, which is done when a sender manipulates the information that he has to give to the receiver, and most of the time it happens in this Upward communication, when you have to communicate or you have to give some information to your supervisor, you are really you're really apprehending that your boss might dislike if you're giving him some undesirable report or undesirable outcome. So you're trying to manipulate that information and giving him only that part of information which he really wants to hear. So it is of course a barrier to the effective communication because the information is not being delivered completely and properly. Then you have this selective perception. Here what happens is that people selectively interpret what they see on the basis of their interests, background, experience and attitudes. So for example, when some female is coming to you for interview and you have in your mind that okay, females, they have some certain work-life balance issues, or they really go home early, they cannot sit late, and on the basis of that you decode your communication with that female interviewee on the basis of the interpretations, on the basis of the different biases that you have in your mind, or different stereotyping that you have in your mind. On the basis of that you are also going to make your decision, and on the basis of that you are going to make your communication with that interview, which is not going to be effective then. Then the information overload, as I told you, that the managers, they are receiving multiple informations from the multiple channels at the same time, so they can be faced with this information overload, and in that kind of situation they may not be ready to receive more emails, or they may not be ready to hear to more people and hear to more customers or suppliers, etc., and they need a break before they can get out of this situation. So this is again, when there is this kind of situation, it is a barrier to effective communication. Then the emotions that you have at the time you are receiving certain information, that is really important. So if you're extremely happy or you're extremely sad, then the information or the message that you will be receiving, you will be interpreting it the different way than it would be when you are emotionally stable. So language is again very important. The different words, they have different meanings for different people. So that can be a barrier to this effective communication. We'll be seeing it in detail in our next slides. Then we have this communication apprehension, which is the undue tension and anxiety about oral communication, written communication, or both. So some people are really they really fear giving presentations. They just cannot give presentations. They're not very good orally. Some people are not good in writing, right? They really apprehend those modes of communications. So that could be an barrier to effective communication. Then there are certain gender differences that also serve as a barrier to effective communication, such as men, when they talk more about the power, about their social status, and about independence. When women talk, they more talk for intimacy, and they more talk for establishing different connections with different people. So men talk in terms of giving solutions, and women talking about just for sharing their problems and just for getting a feeling of closeness, right? So these are all the differences between the genders which can act as barriers between communication between men and women. Then silence as communication. Sometimes when there is absence of speech or noise, that can indicate that you're thinking something, you're angry, or you're fearing something, right? Then we have this politically correct communication. Communication needs to be politically correct. So how we define it, that in an increasingly diverse workforce, sometimes there are certain words that certain sets of community or certain sets of people might be offended with, right, and they may not like to hear, such as handicapped, blind and elderly. So these words, they have been replaced with physically challenged, visually impaired and senior. And foreign BBC has said to the folk news broadcasters that foreign words should not be used, but instead international should be used. And similarly, little people, dwarfs word should be replaced with little people. Then certain words, removal of these words from the dictionary, what it has lent to, it has resulted in difficulty in communicating effectively, or difficulty in communicating what you exactly mean to the receivers. There are certain words which are difficult to replace, and if they are replaced, they are not, their true meaning is gone. So this is a cartoon for you to see. Then we see that what are the different barriers to effective communication. We are discussing this topic, and we see that with respect to different cultures, how these barriers can be there. Such as semantics, if we see that words such as efficiency is not translatable into Russian. It is a word which is used in American economy, efficiency. It is not possible to translate it into Russian. Then different word connotations, such as hey, it means yes, I'm listening in the Japanese culture, but in the US culture it means I agree. So there is difference between I'm listening and I agree. So if you're saying yay, a US person will interpret it differently and a Japanese person will interpret it differently. So this is a cross-cultural communication barrier, right? Then different tone differences, they can also result in ineffective communication, or in a barrier which is promoted by this differences in cultures. So such as the people, they speak differently at home, at office, they speak more formally at offices and informally at homes in certain cultures, but it is not so in certain other cultures. Then we have these perception differences. Like Thais, they don't have this no word in their dictionary, right? So here I have a few examples for you that how hand gestures, they mean different things in different countries. So if you see that OK sign on the left hand side, if you look at the position of the thumb, in the US this is just a friendly sign for all right, right, or good going. In Australian Islamic countries, it is equivalent to what generations of high school students know as flipping the bird, like doing like this, right? So then we have this victory sign, that how in many parts of the world this means victory or peace. In England, if the palm and fingers face inward, it means up yours, especially if executed with an upward jerk of the fingers. And we have another example here too for you to read. Then we have the different communication barriers with respect to the cultural context. So high context cultures are those where you really heavily rely on the non-verbal communication methods, and you heavily rely on subtle situational cues, but it's not the case in low context cultures, where you heavily rely on what is formally written or what is formally documented or what is the part of the contract. So here we have an example of a few countries that are high context cultures versus countries that are low context cultures. So what you need to do is that when you are communicating cross-culturally, to communicate effectively, you need to assume that there are differences between people. You need to assume that people in the other culture, they are not the same, they don't think the same, they don't have the same values as you have, and you really need to make your evaluations that are not subjective, but that are objective evaluations. You really need to observe people, and then you need to make certain interpretations, and you need to develop certain hypotheses based on your deep understanding of how others behave, and what are the different cultures, what are the different norms, what are the different values of the different people. You try to make an understanding of that, and then try to communicate with people for effective communication cross-culturally. Otherwise, as I told you earlier in my previous slides, how in different cultures, different words, they can lead to different meanings, and different gestures, how they can lead to different meanings, right? So try to put yourself in others' shoes before communicating with others. So you need to show empathy, you need to cultivate empathy when you are especially communicating cross-culturally. So here I would like you to see this in this figure, and try to consider the way in which this man is communicating. What channel is he using? How rich is it? For what kinds of messages would it be appropriate, and for what kind of messages it won't be appropriate? So we have discussed all the different aspects in this lecture, and I hope that it should be easier for you to give answers to all these questions after having a look at this picture. With this, we come to an end of this of today's lecture. I hope you had a wonderful time listening to me. Thank you very much. See you again. Allah Hafiz.